The moment my daughter, her face a mask of serene righteousness sculpted by years of curated wellness mantras, told me I was a parasite, I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, cold sense of release, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying, the crushing, invisible weight of her secrets, had just been lifted from my soul. She was kicking me out of the house I had saved for her, a house built on a foundation of lies she believed were long buried beneath the rocky, unforgiving soil of coastal Maine. She wanted freedom, a life unburdened by the living, breathing reminder of her greatest shame. What she failed to understand, in her pursuit of a flawless narrative, was that I held the key to the cage she lived in, and I was about to lock the door from the outside. She threw my suitcase as if it were a bag of spoiled fish, a thing of rot and disgust. It hit the damp, gray-shingled porch steps with a dull, final thud, bounced once with a soft wheeze of escaping air, and came to rest against the cluster of dying hydrangeas. Their once vibrant blue heads were now brown and brittle, a mirror of the affection that had once bloomed in this very spot. I stared at it. The suitcase was soft leather, a faded burgundy, the same one I'd used when I moved in 5 years ago to help her raise her baby. Back then, her nights were filled with the shrieking cries of a colicky infant and her own tears of exhaustion. Her mornings were desperate pleas for my strength, my help, my presence. Now, she just stood there, arms crossed over her expensive cashmere sweater, her expression sharp with something far colder than rage. It was indifference, a practiced, hollow void. "You're holding us back, Mom," she said, her voice smooth and polished, like a line from one of the self-help podcasts she consumed daily. "Me, Marcus, Leo, all of us. You've made this house your prison, and we're done being your inmates." The words were absurd, theatrical, yet delivered with the conviction of someone who had rehearsed them in front of a mirror. I blinked. The salty North Atlantic air felt sharp and clean against my face, a stark contrast to the stale atmosphere of resentment that had thickened inside the house for months. No tears came. I was far past that. Tears were a currency of grief, and what I felt now was something else entirely. An awakening. She wasn't finished. The performance required a final act. "You have 3 days to leave. I've already spoken to a locksmith. He's coming on Friday." I looked down at the suitcase. A corner of my old folded gray sweater was sticking out of the broken zipper like a pale, tired tongue. I bent over slowly, my knees groaning in protest, and picked it up. The handle creaked under the weight of the few possessions I had left in the world. My hands didn't shake, but hers had, all those years ago, when she'd first begged me to move in. Her hands had trembled as she'd clutched mine, her eyes wide with fear and desperation, the perfect picture of a damsel in distress. 3 days, I repeated quietly, standing upright and meeting her gaze, which flickered for a fraction of a second. Her tone became clipped, annoyed that I wasn't collapsing into a dramatic scene of weeping and begging. My compliance was ruining her moment of righteous empowerment. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she ordered. "Harder for whom, Chloe?" I asked, a genuine curiosity in my voice. "For all of us," she snapped, a tiny fissure appearing in her serene facade. It wasn't the righteous anger of the oppressed breaking free. It was the sharp, panicked fear of being questioned, of losing control of the narrative she had so meticulously constructed around herself. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply turned and walked past her, down the worn stone steps, the suitcase's wheels thudding a mournful rhythm behind me. Each roll on the gravel driveway was a little quieter than the last, a fading heartbeat. She didn't call after me. She simply closed the heavy oak door, the decisive click echoing in the damp air. I stopped at the curb, beside her ridiculously oversized SUV, and pulled out my phone. My fingers moved with a calm I hadn't felt in years. I dialed one number, a number I knew by heart. "My financial advisor," Mr. Davies answered on the second ring, his voice a familiar, steady baritone that had guided me through decades of financial uncertainty. Beatrice. Yes, Mr. Davies, it's me. I watched a fog bank, thick as cotton batting, roll in from the sea, preparing to swallow the picturesque harbor. I need you to begin the process of removing my name as co-signer and guarantor from the mortgage on 14 Harborview Lane. There was a pause on the line, but it was not one of surprise. Mr. Davies had managed my meager finances for 20 years. He had drafted the documents for the secret settlement. He knew where all the bodies were buried. "Are you sure, B?" he asked, his voice softening with genuine concern. "She's asked me to leave," I said, my voice flat and devoid of self-pity. "I'm not staying where I'm not welcome. I just need you to start the paperwork today." "Understood," he said, his tone shifting from personal to professional, crisp and efficient. "I will begin the withdrawal process, but you know the terms of the guarantee you structured. Once your name is removed, she will have 30 days to refinance the loan in her own name. Given her credit history, that will be challenging." "She wanted freedom," I said, the words tasting like salt and iron as I stared at the house she now considered solely hers. "I'm just giving her a taste of it." The motor lodge I found was a relic from another era, tucked away off the highway like a forgotten secret. It had peeling paint, floral curtains that smelled of dust and time, and a buzzing fluorescent light in the bathroom that flickered like a dying heartbeat. I laid the burgundy suitcase on the bed and stared at the careless jumble of my life inside. She had folded me out of her world like I was a cluttered, inconvenient napkin on her perfectly curated minimalist table. The truth was, the house was never truly hers. Not legally, not morally. She had never been approved for that mortgage alone. At the age of 20, she had incinerated her credit history in a fiery, twisted metal wreck on a dark country road. It was the kind of incident they hush up in small, tight-lipped New England towns, the kind where prominent names are kept out of the police blotter if you know how to ask nicely, and more importantly, pay quietly and completely for the silence. The memory, suppressed for a decade, rose unbidden. The shrill ring of the phone at 2:13 a.m. Her voice, a choked, hysterical whisper. "Mom, I messed up. It's bad." My frantic drive to the county hospital, my heart hammering against my ribs. The sight of her, slumped in a plastic chair in the emergency room, her face pale and streaked with tears, a single cut above her eye. The state trooper, a man with tired, pitying eyes, explaining the situation. She had crossed the center line. She had hit a minivan. A child was in surgery. Her blood alcohol level was just over the legal limit. The next few weeks were a blur of cold dread. I met the other family. The father, a grim-faced lobsterman. The mother, her eyes hollowed out by grief and rage. Their 5-year-old son was alive, miraculously, but he had a shattered leg and a long, painful recovery ahead. They wanted justice. They wanted Chloe's future to be as broken as their son's body. And so I did what I had to do. I drained my life savings. I cashed out my retirement account. I took out a second mortgage on my own small home. I hired the best lawyer in the state, a man who specialized in making problems disappear. He negotiated a private out-of-court settlement. The number was staggering, enough to secure my daughter's freedom and my own permanent state of financial precarity. Chloe pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, reckless driving, which was sealed due to her first offender status. No criminal record, no jail time. I had bought her a clean slate, paid for in the currency of my own future. When it came time for her and Marcus to buy their own home, the bank laughed at her loan application. Her credit score was a ghost, so I stepped in again. I became the guarantor. I became the co-signer. I became the invisible scaffolding that allowed her to build her perfect life, the one she now paraded on social media as a testament to her own strength and resilience. She had been grateful at first. There were tears, hugs so tight they hurt, whispered promises of eternal devotion. But gratitude, I learned, has a shelf life. It soured into resentment. My presence became a constant, uncomfortable reminder of her weakness, of the night she had failed so spectacularly. My quiet competence became an indictment of her own fragility. The digs started small. "Mom, that's such an old-fashioned way of thinking." "Don't be so dramatic, Mom. It's just a spilled glass of milk." It escalated. At a dinner party with her sophisticated friends, after I'd spent 2 days cooking, she'd laughed and said, "My mom has this charming boomer tendency to see catastrophe around every corner. She's addicted to being needed." I had just smiled, cleared the plates, and felt a piece of my love for her chip away. She began to call me by my first name, Beatrice, claiming it was more equal, more empowering. She was reframing our relationship, recasting me from savior to peer, and from peer to, eventually, a burden. She would have hushed tense arguments with Marcus about money in the next room, and the next day, I would quietly use my meager Social Security check to pay the electric bill or buy the week's groceries, a secret subsidy to their flawless lifestyle. And now, I was the parasite. That night in the motel, I didn't cry. I made a pot of tea, the strong, dark kind she always hated, and opened a notebook. I began to write, not to her, but for myself, to document the truth before it faded completely. Day 1, I wrote, banished, not shocked, just finally acknowledged. She wants the house. She wants the life. But the house doesn't belong to her. Not yet. It was a Thursday when I saw the photo that sealed my resolve. I was scrolling through my phone when her name popped up, tagged in a post by a friend of hers. The picture was a sea of smiling faces, champagne flutes held aloft in what looked like her living room. In the center was Chloe, radiant, holding up a peace sign, her smile wide and triumphant. The caption read, "To fresh starts and finally cutting the cord. So proud of you, C, for shedding that dead weight. #self-care. Breaking cycles. Good vibes. Only." My blood turned to ice water. I clicked through the album. There were more pictures. A cake decorated with the words, "New Chapter." A glittery banner that read, "Out with the old." The comments were a viper's nest of sycophantic praise. "Yes, Queen. So happy you're free," one read. Another, "Is this about the guilt trip, lady? So glad you're finally prioritizing your own peace." Then I saw the one that stopped my heart. A close-up of a framed sign on the mantelpiece, the one I had given her, now with a new quote written in elegant calligraphy. "Don't just break the cycle of trauma, burn the whole damn bridge." C.H. Chloe Holloway. She had quoted herself, positioning her act of cruelty as a brave, therapeutic breakthrough. She had turned matricide of the soul into a pithy, inspirational slogan. I sat with the phone in my lap, the air in the small motel room becoming thick and still. It was the casual, celebratory ease of it that broke something deep inside me. How effortlessly they had twisted my love into a burden, my sacrifice into manipulation. How easily they had recast me as the villain in her heroic story of self-actualization. I thought of my grandson, Leo, his sweet, innocent face, and wondered what story they had told him about why Grandma was gone. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Davies again. My voice was calm, clear as a winter sky. "I need you to move forward with the full and immediate withdrawal of my name from the mortgage," I said. "B, I thought we agreed to give her a grace period." "She's already celebrating her freedom," I interrupted. "I think she's ready to have it, all of it." "I'll draft the paperwork," he said softly, a note of grim understanding in his voice. "Thank you," I said. Then I hung up and sat very still, watching the evening light fade from the small window like someone dimming a stage. The show was over. Now came the cost of admission. The official letter from the bank, thick and intimidating, arrived at her house on a Monday. I only knew because my phone began to light up hours later, a frantic series of missed calls and increasingly panicked voicemails. I let them all go, listening as her tone devolved from sharp anger to sputtering confusion to raw, pleading terror. On the 6th call, I answered. "What did you do?" she spat, the sound ragged and stripped of its usual practiced calm. "I did what you asked me to do," I said, my own voice even and low. "I removed myself from your life." "This isn't funny, Mom. This is my home. The bank is saying it's in default. You're punishing me." "No," I said, and the word was a stone, not a feather. "I am not punishing you. I am simply letting the truth breathe. And the truth is, you were never approved for that mortgage. You never could have afforded that house. Not on your own." There was a thick, choked silence, filled with the static of a dawning, horrifying realization. "You're doing this to get even." "I already got even, Chloe," I replied, the memory of her tear-streaked 20-year-old face flashing in my mind. "I got even the day I signed away my future to save yours. I got even every time I smiled and nodded when you introduced me as the woman who helps with my son. I got even every time I covered your bills in secret. I am done getting even. I am simply stepping aside." "I'll fight this," she snapped, her voice regaining a sliver of its old baseless defiance. "I'll take you to court. You'll regret this." This was the moment I had been waiting for, the move on the chessboard I had anticipated for years. "Then, I suppose," I said softly, "we should both be prepared to tell the whole story, the real story. I've already authorized Mr. Davies to release the complete file to the bank's legal team, should it become necessary. The original accident reports, the toxicology results, the settlement details, your signed confession from all those years ago." "You wouldn't," she whispered, the sound a ghost of a word, all the air sucked from her lungs. "I already have," I said, and then I gently ended the call. The emergency custody hearing was held in a courtroom that smelled of old paper and quiet despair. Chloe sat across from me, looking haggard and defeated, a stark contrast to the radiant wellness guru from the party photos. Her lawyer looked bored, already calculating his fee. In the middle of it all sat my grandson, Leo, his small feet dangling from the chair, watching everything with wide, confused eyes. "Given the pending foreclosure and lack of a stable residence," the judge began, her voice weary, "the court must determine a temporary guardian for the child." "She's trying to steal him from me," Chloe cried out, pointing a trembling finger at me. "No," I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the room. "I am trying to keep him safe." "You've taken my home, now you want my son?" she accused, her voice cracking. "The bank is taking the house, Chloe," I corrected her gently. "I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own choices." She crumpled then, not like a fighter but like a child who had run out of excuses. "Please," she whispered, the fight gone, leaving only a raw, gaping wound. "Don't take him from me. He's all I have left." I looked at the judge, a woman who had surely seen every flavor of human brokenness, and I spoke my truth, the one that had been silent for so long. "I'm not taking him," I said. "I'm holding him until she can." The judge leaned forward, her eyes sharp and discerning. "Mrs. Holloway, do you intend to seek permanent custody?" I shook my head. "No, Your Honor. I want my daughter to get on her feet, to find her way. But until then, someone needs to keep her child from falling through the cracks she created." The gavel fell, its sound echoing the finality of the closing door of her house. And just like that, I officially became what I had always been in practice, the safe harbor. The public implosion was swift and brutal. The story broke not from a mainstream reporter, but from a blog post written by the aunt of the boy Chloe had hit. She wrote about a child who had to learn to walk again, about a family that chose mercy over justice, and about the sickening irony of seeing the girl who caused it all on social media, preaching about healing while celebrating her freedom from the very woman who had saved her from prison. It went viral. The foreclosure was public record. The court documents were unearthed. Suddenly, the narrative Chloe had so carefully crafted was incinerated by the bright, hot fire of the truth. Her brand, built on a mountain of curated lies, collapsed overnight. Her empire of empowerment crumbled into dust. I sat on a bench by the harbor a few weeks later, a cup of tea warming my hands. The fog had lifted, revealing a crisp, clear autumn sky. Across the water, I could see the roof of the house, which had been sold at auction to a developer. It looked small from here, insignificant. Beside me, Leo was drawing on the pavement with a piece of chalk. He drew a lopsided house with a heart-shaped chimney, and next to it, a stick figure with curly hair holding a cup. "That's you, Grandma," he said, pointing. "So it is," I smiled. "Are you watching the sad house?" he asked. I looked out at the water, at the gulls circling in the clean, cold air. "It's not sad," I said. "It's just quiet now. It's resting, like people do when they need to heal." He nodded, accepting this, and went back to his drawing. There was no victory parade, no public vindication, just the quiet rhythm of the tide and the scratching sound of chalk on stone. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because love isn't just about sheltering someone from the storm. Sometimes the most profound and painful act of love is to finally let them feel the rain, so they might, at long last, learn to find their own way out of it, and maybe, just maybe, learn to swim.